ahead and talk about this while I'm on my phone. It's the middle of the night, I think, actually. Yep, it is the middle of the night in like 8 minutes. Um, I was watching a classic interview um, of Muhammad Ali at Deer Lake, and I just I got nostalgic about thinking about old boxing stuff like tonight. Sometimes I get that way. Um, Sometimes I'll just start out with like Mike Tyson interviews and things like that and his documentaries and I'll relook through that because I just get nostalgic. So of course, Muhammad Ali popped into my head, and man, the Deer Lake interview is one of the best interviews I think I've ever seen. And this guy back in the 70s and the 60s was speaking fluently, talking not even shit. It's just he was so supremely intelligent and so fluent in and sharp-witted that it's a fucking shame that this guy came down with Parkinson's and was silenced, because he would be in a room full of white people talking about Allah and black you know segregation in America, and how enslavement of blacks has been one of the blackest eyes in American and human history, in front of white people in the 70s. And he would just go on and on about taking on the establishment and things like this. And I'm just sitting here right now, and I'm going to be fucking honest with you. He is one of the most influential men that has ever walked the face of the earth. Let me just run this by you one more time. He was sitting in a room full of white people as a black Muslim man in the 70s, talking about Allah, praying 5 times a day, saying that Allah was the only true God, in front of a room full of white people, and everybody was agreeing with him. Nobody had any qualms against him in that room. In the 70s. I mean, this guy is an absolute gentleman among gentlemen. I mean, he is a king among men. And it is tragic, the card that he was dealt there at the end of his life. Because I ended up watching a 2001 interview, obviously, when Will Smith, played Muhammad Ali in that movie about Muhammad Ali. And I look back at that, and he walks into the room, and he's shuffling around doing the whole Parkinson's bit. And he can barely talk, and he lived in silence for years. Lived in silence for years when he was one of the most influential human beings to ever exist. Had the most to give, had the most to expel to everybody. And he was quieted. 1967, quieted when he disagreed with a war because he didn't want to hurt people, because he didn't even know them and he had no issue with them. He was sat out for years during his prime as a boxer because of something he believed in. How many people would do that nowadays? How many people would want to show up? If you were dealt a card in 2016 of having to sit out basically the primes of your years as an athlete or a musician or uh, you know, really anything you can think of, whether you're a race car driver or whether you're, you know, an investigative journalist, it doesn't even matter. You can equate this to any walk of life. You don't want to show up at the end of it. If you got screwed over for something that you believed in and you stayed firm and strong like Muhammad Ali, you are a king among men. And not only do you come back, not necessarily for your skill or your aspirations to still be great, you come back and you still are just as proactive about the issues as you were before. You know, Muhammad Ali is, I mean, I wouldn't say a perfect human being because nobody's perfect, but this man was a goddamn legend. I can't say it enough. He was a king among men. And those who took his death lightly, it's so depressing. It's so depressing. Because we will never have another man walking this earth ever again, taken and absorbed and considered like Muhammad Ali. Never ever again. You can't even go outside in 2016 and say Muslim without getting nearly killed by people saying Muslims are terrible human beings. You know, the whole ISIS bit that's going on nowadays. We need somebody like Muhammad Ali, like Cassius Clay. You know, this man was one of the most influential people to ever live. And he was taken for granted when we had him, and now that he's gone, barely anyone says anything anymore. When he was the leader of a lot of change, and he was just a guy who knew how to move his feet, use his talker, use his brain, and punch people. And this guy he had supreme intellect. In 1974, he was sitting in a room full of white people talking about how black pride needed to be uplifted instead of being, you know, diminished and depressed and oppressed. I'm a white male. And me listening to him nowadays, we have not heard anyone speak the way that he is spoken. He spoke like that in 1974. We have heard no one since anywhere near close to our time and our era speak so fluently and so persuasively ever, and it will never happen again. Muhammad Ali, I don't even like to think about him, just because it makes me so sad that we'll never have another special human being like him ever again. And it is a shame that he was silenced by a disease like Parkinson's. It's a shame. It's a fucking shame. We need another Muhammad Ali. We need another persuasive individual who can speak from the heart and speak from the cuff, and people respect him and understands what he's saying, and you know that he's not trying to disillusion you, not trying to sway you for his personal gain, but for the gain of humanity. It's a fucking shame. It'll never happen again. Muhammad Ali will live on forever, but never in the context of how he was when he was alive and in his prime. And that's a shame.